So with your mix of in Solitude, Buster, when you initially got the multi-track, did you have a listen through to all the sounds and performances first?
Yeah, since this is real drums, it's really important to know kind of what I'm doing because this song has both like the faster parts and the slower parts, which is like something you have to consider when you go into the mixing process.
Yeah, and from that point there, did you import session templates like your master bus, or how was your initial master bus sort of top-down approach for this one?
I've been for years updating my template to give me like a good starting point with most genres or like most types of metal, I guess. So I have like a full routing going for drums, guitars, bass, and everything. And how I have it set up with my instrument bus is I have my drums here, bass, guitar. They go to my instruments bus here, and that in turn goes to my master bus. And then all the other stuff like leads and synths and vocals that are like on top of the instruments, they go to a separate bus with nothing on it that then goes to my master bus. And that way I can compress my instruments super hard together and distort them and all sort of stuff. And the other stuff is not touched, and that's gonna be floating on top of the instruments instead of being baked into the compression.
Sure, fascinating. And then from there, did you initially start with polarity summating your drums, or did you go straight in for selecting samples?
I usually just listen to like kick and snare first, probably kick first, and then kind of listening to how dynamic the playing is and how much I have to do to get a like consistent kick sound. And in this case, in most cases, to be fair, I do go for something like this, which is like drum leveler, it's called, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's eliminating some of the dynamics I don't want, and it's also making the kick a lot shorter, and it's removing some of the bleed from the cymbals and stuff like that, so it won't interfere, because I want the cymbals to come from the actual cymbal mics, not the kick mic, because it's not going to sound that good. So that's kind of what I did, and all of the real kicks go to real kick here, which is a folder, and so I can process them individually from my sample, which is here. Um, so the only sample I'm blending in is this one shot here that I'm usually using. This just like my sample. I've been using that for years, and that's kind of very consistent and it always the same level, which is going to be blended with the more dynamic kick here. So I can show you what they sound like here. So let's find a part here. So this is real kick, and here's the sample. So together. And it's really important that these are in phase with each other, because if I flip this, for instance, flip the phase here, all the bass just disappears.
And on the individual acoustic real kick source, are you using frequency bracketing or any particular approach with those different microphones?
I don't think I did anything actually. I just processed them together, all the real mics here. So I could have EQ'd them separately, but I just felt that I didn't have to.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of EQ going on though. They're usually kick is usually really low end heavy, and from the real kick I would want more of the high end rather than the low end. And this is definitely a tone match. So I am matching the frequencies to one of the kick sounds I like. I have like my favorite kick sounds registered in this EQ plugin so that I can tone match and match the frequencies to anything I want and get that same type of sound, even though it's a completely different source. So that's kind of what I did there. And this is some compression. This kind of, I would say this is like a steroids for any like drum. So let's see what it does here. So it's like really bringing that attack out and really making it processed sounding, which is what I like.
Fantastic. And from an ambience perspective, the kick sample that you're using there is quite a dry sample, right? It's not got like, and are you sending any of those signals, your kick signals to reverb?
Yeah, so all of the channels here are getting sent to the reverb here. So we have like a consistent like room. Well, as you can hear, it's not that, it's pretty low in volume, but it's kind of being blended in with the real room that we have here. And that has a fair amount of kick as well. So you're getting the length from the rooms and the reverb combined, yeah.
Fantastic. And then moving on to your snare drum.
Yeah. So this I did blend like a more dynamic sample. And I did some processing on the snare that is pretty heavy on my computer. So I had to bounce it down, which removes some of the bleed. So I'm going to show you here what we have. There's a fast part. So here's what it sounds like. Let's see if is that a real snare? Right, okay. So that, dude, I might have swapped out the snare entirely. I'm realizing now. It's hard to remember exactly why I do everything. But I think I wanted a more hard-hitting snare, so I probably just swapped it out. Yeah, pretty sure. So this is a sample entirely, the snare. So, and we have the bottom mic, the overhead mic to get some stereo width. So all of these, and this is like a one-shot that I like to use. So I blend that in with the more dynamic sample.
So the overhead signal that you're using there is?
That the overhead is a sample as well, but it's just like the overhead mics of that sample.
Of that sample.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I probably used the real snare at first, and I probably realized I didn't think it worked for what I was looking for, so I swapped it out. That's probably, but I'm still getting that real feel and that energy from like the cymbal mics and the room mics, where you also hear the real snare. It's just that the close mic wasn't consistent enough for me personally.
Got you. And then you're taking all your snares to the snare bus, and that's where, is that where the heavy lifting is as far as all your processing?
Yeah, there's a couple of EQ moves I'm doing. There's quite extreme, but that's on the separate channels, and they all get summed to this, which has even more EQ. Yeah. And it also has that Sheps thing I talked about. That's like steroids for any snare. I can show you what it does here. It's just like adds that attack. Yeah. Then we have some distortion to just make it more processed. I'm just adding these plugins when I feel that I need to beef it up. So the reason I would add a distortion here is probably because the snare sounded a bit thin. Maybe it had too much transient, but I wanted to keep the attack and the transient, but I still wanted like more like even and thicker attack sound, and that's what I get from the distortion. Even more EQ here. This is like done in stages, so that's why this is a new insert of an EQ, because I might do this like 3 hours in, while I did this maybe hour 1. So rather than putting that into the same EQ, I would rather do a new one, because that way I just knew like, okay, this is what I did later, and then I can remove it easily if it wasn't the right move for this.
Sure. And then the rest of the processing on the bus?
Yeah, then we have some even more distortion, but this is not really distorting that much. It does add a really cool low end that I like, but it's very subtle, and it kind of shaves off that super high end, like over like 10 kilohertz, and that's not really something I like. And this shaves off even more transient. It's all about like generating a lot of attack and transient, and then kind of taming it with the processing, which makes a certain sound, like a really processed sound, but I do enjoy that attack. And then we have Soothe, which kind of deals with any harsh frequencies that might kind of hurt your ear a little bit. So I kind of finish off with that to make sure I'm good in that respect.
Fantastic. And the other processes to the right of Soothe, are they?
These are the parallel buses. We can go through those if you want to. So I'm gonna loop a little part here. Maybe we can do something like this. So I'm gonna show you what this sounds like dry without the parallel bus. It's not gonna be much. So that's,
Yeah.
then we have this, which is called sustain, because that is what it's adding. It's adding sustain, and that means a short attack, and a fast release.
Yeah, to really bring out the sustain. You got some saturation on there as well.
Yeah, I don't usually do this, but apparently I did that here. So it's that, the distortion, and this compressor here, but it's not doing a lot. I'm seeing it's mostly snare here. This is kind of like you mix, and kind of the compression changes depending on the levels you have. So it's not actually that compressed. And here we have the attack. This, I'm removing some low end on the snare here because the distortion here reacts a lot to the low end of the snare, which can sound a bit like weird. So I tame that. Then we go to this compressor, which is slamming it, and then just a limiter to contain it a little bit. Then we have a distortion. Gonna pull these up here. So what I want to do here, I want to focus it to the mid-range. So what I'm doing here is removing some lows, really cranking the distortion here. And then after the distortion, removing some lows and removing that. These highs are not good if you listen to them. They're a bit weird, so I'm removing them to kind of focus the distortion to more of the low frequencies and mid frequencies. And I'm blending that in to the dry here. So that's the dry, and these are all the parallel buses at the same time.
That's interesting. How are you using the dry bus there? It's just literally another version of the original send source that you're blending along with.
Yeah. So I don't. These are parallel because these are in parallel blended with this. So these are not parallel on the channel. These are 100% mix on the channel, and I'm blending these in with this that has nothing on it.
And is it routed to that, or is that dry channel a parallel bus or a direct bus?
All of these buses, all of the shells and stuff are being sent to all of these buses in different amounts, basically. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Superb. And then you're sending kick bus and snare bus, and then what else is going to the parallels? A bit of metal work in your rooms.
I'm sending the toms there. We have both. Both samples and real toms. Some of these fills are a bit like played a bit soft, so I have like super triggered sounding samples, super like fake sounding samples blended with the real stuff. So the fake toms sound like this. So it's like super like
transient.
Yeah, just a. But if you blend it with the real, you get both.
Beautiful. What are the tom samples? Are they some of your own, or?
Let's see.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know where they are. They say tom 2 spots. I use so many samples. I probably just tried something. I have extreme amounts of samples, so I just picked something that sounded cool. I'm not really sure what those are, to be honest. But I blended those with the real toms. But the real toms also have some stuff to remove as much bleed as possible. But it's really hard when you play fills like he's doing, where he's hitting the splash cymbal and right after he's hitting the toms, which means that the splash cymbal is inevitably going to leak into the tom mic here. But I can play with and without this setup here. So listen to how much cymbals are coming through now. So there's a lot of cymbals. So,
And what are you using there to?
yeah, this is quite a weird, complex setup. This is like a version of a bow from Sausin. He has this trick. What it is this is all in parallel. So this is a VST loader that I can load plugins into, and this is at 50%. This is removing all of the attack as much as possible with this spiff. This is like a transient designer. It both boosts and cuts depending on what you want. So I'm actually removing all of the transients, which kind of leaves you with only the sustain, and then I filter here, which leaves you with only cymbals, and then I phase flip that and put it 50%, which leaves the high end only being transients. So the other way around. So it's quite a weird thing, but it works. It works great.
Fantastic! What a great approach.
I don't see people use that trick, but there's a lot of tricks for that nowadays. But yeah, it really works. It works on snare as well, which I did probably do on this snare, but then I gave up on it. But yeah,
I've seen people crossfade. They'll apply a low pass filter and then they'll crossfade it. So as the hit decays, they'll crossfade into the low pass filter that keeps the sustain of the lows without the spill.
Yeah, I've done that as well. It's a great trick too, for sure. This is just kind of faster, you know, and it works great, especially if you're already going to blend in samples. Then it's like, might as well use that and combine that with the sample, then you get a great tom sound.
And are it looks there like you're taking your sends to verb from the tom sum of both the
Yeah, so we have all of these folders, same with the snare and the kick. So these are the plugins and these are the sends.
Yep.
So here you have the reverb and we have the sustain attack, distortion. All of these have different amounts. I kind of set those, I find like a place where everything is playing, and then I kind of listen to all of the buses by themselves, and I kind of, it's also like a hierarchy. It's like a compression hierarchy. If you have a fill, you don't want the kick to duck everything, but you don't want the snare to duck everything. So you kind of have to balance it in the compression while you're listening to the fill, and that's how I balance my parallel buses for sure. And that's the same for all of these. I don't send the cymbals to my parallel buses or my reverbs. I do send the rooms there, and I do send the rooms also to sustain and attack, but not the distortion. So that's just kind of me trying stuff, and does it sound good, yes or no, and that's how I decide that.
Interestingly, it doesn't sound like you're hitting your rooms too hard with compression at all. You're not going too aggressive there.
Let's see what I did. I probably did a lot on, I committed these. Let's see what I did. So what I did here is basically, I have, like I said, with my kick and my snare, I have like EQs, like snare 1 EQ, snare 2 EQ, like EQs of snares that I really was happy with. Or kicks or whatever. Same goes for rooms. So I have my favorite like EQs for rooms. So that's probably what I did here. So the first plugin is just removing some harshness. Soothe it's called. It's this that I used for the snare as well. I'm using that for all of them. So toms, kicks, snares, cymbals, rooms. So that's what's first. And then I have my tone match. But to get that sustain from the rooms that you usually use compression for, if you use a transient designer, and you increase the sustain that way, you won't get the compression effects where it brings up the cymbals. So that's kind of why I did that. So if you listen, they have the sustain, but they're not compressed, like you said, that much. But the cymbals are nice and contained, so it's not. like if you listen, it's mostly kick and snare, and that's what we want. At least that's what I want from the rooms. So that's how I combine them, and I probably EQ them the same to be able to pan them left and right. As you can see here, this is right and this is left, but this is two different mics in two different positions. But I want the rooms to be stereo and to be a whole thing instead of 3 mono. I would like the stereo. That's kind of also why I matched the frequencies, so it's like a whole stereo package of rooms, and then I did some EQ after all this processing as well.
Awesome. And with all of the drums, you just used the one reverb, did you?
Yeah, right. So that's the reverb. That's this reverb, but there's also other processing. So I'm like smashing this first to have all the instruments be the same volume going into the reverb, then EQ, and then some dynamic EQ after that. It's not kind of really necessary, to be honest, but this is like the hard hits should be more in that. Oh, actually not. I mean, okay, it's not that much, but usually I go like this, probably.
Yeah.
But for this, I went for that.
Quite a long reverb time. Is that what you generally go with, a nice long reverb wash?
Yeah, I mean, having long room sounds or room samples might be a bit distracting sometimes. I just want this to have a little bit of that tail because it's not super loud. If you listen to the drum mix and I mute and unmute, not that much, but it does have that. It has that tail at the end of the transients, I suppose. It just gives it a bit more glue, and if there's maybe weird cuts, edits, that this might smooth over that a little bit as well.
And quite a lot of automation with your drum processing there.
Yeah, like I said, I'm very like, I want stuff to hit hard and impact. So when a riff starts or there's like accents or whatever it might be, I usually edit stuff to have a little push. So like you see here, you have the kick buzz. It's gonna do just a little ride, and same with the cymbals here. You can see these 3 hits here. So I just wanted to actually accent where it comes in, and I actually also have this aux crash here.
Yeah.
So if you listen without this part, yeah, with the music here. So with that, we get more flat.
So we were chatting earlier about how you'll sometimes paste up better hits with the real snare drum. Is this something that you needed to do on this session?
So this is all fake. This is all MIDI snare. So that's kind of what I went for with this. Yeah, you know, it's hard to remember all your decisions a while ago, but this sounded great, so I kept this. I probably started with blending this in, and then I listened and I just thought it sounded better just using this, so that's what I did. But I can do that sometimes, definitely. Just if a hit might be off, you can find a spot where you maybe hit way better, and then you can copy it and paste it. Sure. What I did was, though, I did some edits on the cymbals, because I don't think I can demonstrate the audio, though, but the drummer was hitting the kick before the crash, and the editor of this drum performance put the kick on the grid, which means that the crash came after, so it was a bit like lagging. So I did a couple edits on some crash hits to make sure that they were on time with the real kick in the overheads as well.
Brilliant. What were you looking at processing wise with the cymbals? Was it mainly high pass filtering?
Let's see. There's some. I removed some of the snare honk. Probably there's some some overtone, like dong dong. So I probably cut that out. I don't like that super high end. So like 12.5 kilohertz is usually where I cut stuff off, because it just sounds like noise to me. So let's see. That was hats. Yeah, just kind of focusing the frequencies more to the high frequencies, removing some muddy kick here probably, and all of these have Gullfoss, which is kind of a
Yeah.
active dynamic EQ. Let's see what it does here when it plays. It kind of reacts to the material depending on what cymbal it's hitting. It's kind of correcting to maintain the frequency response more to be the same. Here's even more EQ. When I put all the mics together with the drums, I probably felt that it lacked some high end still. Some distortion on top of everything to just thicken it up, because that's a good trick. Like if you're doing a lot of EQ, which I usually do, it kind of the sound can sound a bit disconnected from what it used to be, and distorting it kind of brings it back. It's like kind of glues it all together again and makes it a cohesive sound rather than this weird EQ'd version. I feel like
I've never used it. I always use the Gullfoss on the master bus, but never on the cymbals, which
I recommend it to use it on cymbals, leads, synths, any like resonant kind of not transient heavy sound, like more like, yeah, just sustained sound. It works great.
And the cymbals, you've not taken any of those fed to reverb here?
No, but they are the rooms are being fed there, so effectively you get some cymbals in the reverb.
Yeah.
But my reverb is pretty bright, so like sending cymbals there might be a bit too much, and it sounds a bit weird to me.
Fantastic. Are we okay to move on to looking at the bass?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
So with the multi-track that I sent you, you had quite a number of different options. There was a DI, there was a Trondheim Ska bass one, there was a dark glass, various different cleaner Ampeg. Did you decide to create a bass sound from the DI yourself, or did you use some of the signals that?
Yeah, I'm too proud to use other people's tones. I don't know. It's just I just feel like I want to create it from the ground up, and the way I create stuff kind of goes hand in hand with my like philosophy on everything. So that's kind of what I did. So I went for the DI, and we have 3 buses. One is just the sub, one is the grit track, so like the bass tone, and then we have also stereo grit, which is the same setup as the grit track, just with a stereo cab, which kind of gives you that sense of a room, or like sense of a stereo type bass. So it is stereo. So that's the sub.
And how's that signal created?
So the first thing I do, actually the first thing, this is DI, this is the DI, and it's being sent to all of these 3. First there's a gate. Then this is definitely a tone match. Like I said, I have my favorite frequency response with everything, including a bass DI. So this is like a rough tone match of my favorite bass DI.
Yep.
And a massive gain boost. So we can listen to this with and without. It's just basically scooping it a lot. Yeah. Just getting that high frequency string sound, and some more low end. But yeah, like I said, this is being sent to all of these 3. Here on the sub bus, I'm really distorting a lot to make the sub a super consistent, just a super consistent sound that doesn't like go down in level whatsoever. And there's a couple of ways I'm doing this. The first is distortion.
Are you distorting the lows?
Yeah. But this is not effectively the lows. It's the entire signal. So,
okay.
Yeah. And then I filter. So this is this distorted DI filtered. And then I have this plugin which keeps the level at one place. So it corrects it depending on the note. The volume and the level is going to fluctuate, but this just kind of pins it in place. There's more extreme ways you can do this as well. You can sometimes I filter. Let's see, filter, put this plug in, then distort, then filter again, and then put this plug in again. So it's like really a sausage of low end, basically.
That's fascinating because so many producers want to keep the low end entirely clean on the bass sound, and that's the like a lot of the frequency bracketing approaches. Like Jens Bogren would take the DI, which is super clean, and use that for the lows. But you like distorting the lows. Is that a regular?
I feel like the DI is not consistent enough, especially not in my mixes that are super processed. It's not going to keep up. So I need to really make it super like fat. And the thing, I also have a thing going that's helping me get the kick to be on top of it. This thing. So this is being ducked by the kick. So that makes sure that kick is number one in the low end hierarchy, but this is still super fat and like as loud as it possibly can be, you know.
So it's just sidechained to the to that single band.
Only the low end is sidechained, to the kick, and that's the same for guitars. That's the same for drum rooms. That's the same for cymbals. That's the same for the synths and effects. Also, everything is being sidechained to the kick, but I don't want that feeling. That's why I make the sidechain only affect the low end, because that's not you're not gonna feel that sidechain that you think about in like EDM or something. You're not gonna get that because it's only in the low end, so it's not gonna be heard that way.
No, so you're ducking the rooms and the guitars and everything just in the lows.
Yes, to the kick,
and even the synths.
Yeah,
fantastic. And then the grit channel on the bass.
So we have even more EQ, cutting some mids here before hitting the distortion. So this is multi-band distortion. This is inactive because I want all the bass I want to come from the sub channel, not from the distorted bass, because that's going to be it's really hard to make that work in the mix. It can be a little bit there, of course, but mostly in the low mids and mids. So we have the two bands I'm using here with the heavy saturation. This is like a saturation without a cabinet, so I'm using this with the cabinet here. This is the setting. This is the same as the guitar later, because I want them to be married. I want them to be one unit basically. So that's why I'm using the sync cab here. So the distortion I can show you here. This is the mid channel. And high and together. So as you can hear, there's basically no low end in this, but that's by design. And here's definitely a tone match again. I have my favorite bass sounds, and this is a tone match. This is like, I get where I want to go faster, because let's say I do everything by ear and I do no tone matching, I'm still gonna get here to this place because this is what I want to hear. This is just a faster way, and this is not be all end all. I'm still gonna tweak stuff and make the mix be its own thing. It's just like, this is the general kind of EQ curve I would look for in a bass. I'm gonna play without and with here. So removing low mids, getting some high end in there, and boost them up. And they found like a super harsh ringing there that it took care of. Then we have the soothe guy again, like the others. Here I can isolate here what it's removing. That horrible noise basically. And then I'm finishing off with a multiband on all the frequencies. This could probably be less bands, but this is just a setup I had. It could probably be 4 bands, but yeah, it's a lot of bands.
And you've also got compression on the master bus, have you? On the bass bus, or no?
I'm going to show you that. I'm just going to go through the same setup that I did, the same setup as I just went through happens here as well, only that it's this cab here, which is a stereo room sound,
Yeah.
and it sounds like this. But it's being gated, so like this is getting signal from the bass DI, which means that when the bass DI is quiet, this is not going to ring a bunch. It's just going to be because what I want from this is not sustain. I want stereo, because I used to do like a doubler or a chorus type thing to get that spread, but it sounded a bit fake and 80s-ish. So this is more like a natural room sound, which worked well to blend in with this to get a more stereo.
So it's high pass filtered, and then it's...
This is the detection circuit, this high pass. So because I want it to be super fast when it stops playing.
Got you. So you go gate, and then the Saturn is...
Then this is the EQ. This is a lot, I know, but this is the same deal as the last one. It's tone matched to my favorite bass tone, and then some more stereo spread here. I'm boosting all of the frequencies on the sides 4 dBs to make it even more stereo, because this is going to be very low in the mix, but I just want that connection to the guitars and the sides to have like a cohesive kind of picture.
But there's not actually a bass amp that's going into the cab, the stereo cab.
This could be qualified as the bass amp, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is like the preamp, and this is the cab. Yeah.
Fascinating. You just got that as a super wide setting on the cab. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's cool. And that goes to this bass folder here. Has some EQ. This is more like EQ. Oh, this is a lot of EQ though. This is probably something I did very late, because I probably didn't get the bass to cut through with the other instruments. So I made this tone match. Once again, more tone matching. But it's like I've found my sound, I feel like, and I just want all of my mixes to have the same quality and the same kind of general vibe to it, and that's one of the ways I get there, to make sure that this bass sound is kind of competing with the other stuff, because I don't want a client coming to me like, oh, I listened to your other mix, but when you mixed my stuff it sounded way different, because it will sound different, because it's a different source, a different song, different tuning, different guitar, different player. This is just a way to make sure that I'm actually hitting, and that the instruments are producing the frequencies that I want, and that it is the same as my other stuff, basically.
Representing your tonal identity as a producer.
Exactly. So, and it's also faster at working. So let's see what this sounds like without. This makes sense, because this is like a lot of my bass tone tends to clutter up in like the 90 hertz range here. So I'm using a multi-band or like an active EQ that kind of takes care of that, but to not lose too much low end, I'm at the same time boosting the entire low end here.
Yeah, so just a bit of dynamic EQ.
Yeah,
taking it out where
this is stuff like that you don't think of, because I really like subs, and I generally don't remove a lot of subs, but when I did this tone match, it told me basically that compared to your favorite bass tone, you have 11 dBs at 28 hertz too much, and which helps a lot to glue the mix together. Let's see what it sounds like. It's not bad. It's not bad without it by any means.
Sounds cleaner with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's more scooped and stuff, and the low end is kind of focused more upwards, which is fine. It kind of works better in this mix probably. And then I have this again. This is like nothing is on, but it does something that I like, because you just have to put this on whatever, it's gonna act, even though you don't have these things on, because it's doing something for sure.
Just adding some character.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't know if it's audible here. This is just kind of a thing that I kind of put on, liked it, and never took it off, and it's been in my template since. So I could probably make I probably hear basically no difference. Nah, basically no difference. So, but it's on there because it was good once.
And so, what's I find interesting about your bass sound is there's, compared to other producers, a vastly reduced reliance on compression, probably because you're going for the distortion in the way that you have, which is kind of having a compression-like effect.
Yeah, but this also compresses all the bands a lot, I feel like. Because this is gonna make sure that all the frequencies are pinned to whatever frequency range or frequency profile I determine. So this is a lot of compression, to be fair. And this can count as compression as well, because distortion is kind of compression.
Yeah.
And that's on the sub, which makes it super consistent. So there's some compression for sure.
With your Cymbals, Buster, what was your width perspective? We looked at your rooms and you had the Coles 4038s fully wide there. Are you going for maximum width with the Cymbals, or?
Yeah, I've always done that. Always full left and right on Cymbals. I don't see why you ever want to not do that, because if you have ride mic and hi-hat mic, and those will be placed like 50-50, and then the overheads 100-100, then you get the placement of those things, but you get like, if I would to take in the overheads to maybe 50-50 or 80-80, that I don't see any point in that, because I like stuff wide, and I also have like outboard gear which has a little bit of widening on it. Right. Not here because we're not in my studio, but so that makes it even wider. So I definitely would not make this like 80-80, or other people might do that, but yeah, I just like it super wide. Yeah.
And with the toms, what sort of panning perspectives did you have with the toms?
There's a couple of things you can do. Okay, I did. All right, so I did this kind of natural, what I thought the setup was. So like tom, 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 tom. But you can also do tom, 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 which means like 150, 100, 130, 30, 100 maybe. But yeah, I'm just doing like, 20, 25, 25, 40, 60. That's what I'm doing here.
And you've gone for drummer perspective rather than
always
audience.
Drummer perspective, yeah. But I'm not opposed to any perspective. If the band wants me to have another perspective, I'm fine with that. The only thing I have to do is just reverse the panning, so it's fine. I'd go for that because I'm a drummer, so that's kind of what's natural to me, I suppose.
On previous mixes, you have adopted approach with the snare drum where you attenuate the fundamental of the snare and then send it to parallel and have the frequency bracketing on the parallel.
Oh
track.
Yeah, the snare low track thing. Yeah, I don't do that anymore, but I don't really know why, to be honest. I used to do that because I saw Eric Valentine doing that, and I kind of just got inspired and tried it. But you just do stuff and then you stop doing it because reasons, I guess. I don't know, really. I just try different stuff. I'm not like opposed to doing that again, but I just feel like I don't really have to do that anymore, depending on whatever new mixing techniques I've found.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, let's move on to guitars.
Cool.
If that's okay.
I just saw this. Okay, so I've muted this and got it in here to be in the middle. Let's see. Right. Okay, now okay. So we have four DIs here. I don't know how many I got from you, but
4.
I'm using 3 because I don't like quad tracking. I don't like 2 guitars playing the same thing. That's not for me. I like the detail of 1 take on the left and 1 take on the right. That's just me.
And then the third take that you're using here
is only the plucky guitar. So this is panning to the middle here, and then I'm bringing the shug in from one of the quad trackers so I can get stereo spread on the shug. This is stereo, these two, and this is in the middle, and then it just goes back here.
So basically your double track guitars all the way through apart from a small section where you're just using the central rhythm thickener.
Yep. That's it.
Fantastic. And what's the signal chain with these
Yeah,
guitars?
let's see what I'm doing here. This is some complicated stuff. I use this VST loader to load certain plugins in parallel that doesn't have the parallel function. So this is like overdrive pedal, but the thing about overdrive pedals for me is like they remove too much of the low end, which is fine if you want that super tight tone, but I want to maintain the full frequency spectrum of the DI going into the amp. So I don't want to filter anything, but I still want the effect of this. So I'm blending this in at 40%. So this is just a regular, this is like the typical setting for like a boost pedal, and it's blended in to make it a bit more tight. Let's see if we can listen to that.
Processing the DI before it hits the amp sim.
That's correct. Yeah. And the amp sim has no pedals, so this is kind of the pedal I'm using. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. Not as high. Yeah, not bad, but you get some of that push. But you're not losing that low end I'm talking about. And the amp sim I'm using here, this is only like the amp block and the EQ block, it looks like. So the EQ, I'm taming some low mids, some high mids. That's the thing about amps, like why don't they should have like high mid and low mid controls, but they rarely do.
Yeah.
Because I like my low end to be maybe like 80, 90 hertz, but this low end probably boosted at like 110 or 120 or something. I like it lower. And there's like no way with these controls to control those frequencies. So that's why I use this. So like I said, the boost pedal going into the amp here, this is the settings. I usually go for like pretty scooped and a lot of high end. And then the same cab as we did on the bass tone here.
Yeah.
So that's the setup for the tone, and then it's just a bunch of EQ.
So obviously the Gajera amp, you're not using a cab on there on the actual plugin. You left that off.
Yeah, I just like the GGD cabs. I mean, I haven't tried the Gojira cabs to be fair, but I'm sure they're great. But I just like this a lot. Like the sound of it. And then this is going to probably be a scary amount of EQ as always.
So one of the things we really loved about the mix that you returned to us was the sense of stereo width. Is that something that's really coming from the guitars, or have you got a very similar signal in the left and right of the guitars?
Yeah, it's similar. It's the same, exactly the same on left and right. But the thing with stereo width, I think, has less to do with panning and with like mid-side information. I think it has to do with how stuff is EQ'd and how the mix is glued together. Because if you make everything super glued and super like, if the drums, bass, and guitars are interacting in a certain way that I strive for, the width will come with that. But that being said, there are also like width plugins. So this is like a shuffler. So this is widening that I've been using for years. That is making stuff wide for sure, and like my outboard stuff that I don't have here also has widening on it. So there's widening happening, but there's also like this, for instance, this is a mid boost of 4 dBs in the mid frequencies and the mid band. So this is actually the opposite of widening. So this is actually I'm pushing the mids in the mid channel, so in the mid frequency or the mid field of the stereo field on the guitars. Because without this boost, if you listen to this mix in like in a car or like a Bluetooth speaker, the guitars can easily disappear, and it's very apparent if I don't use this because of the way I EQ and the way I widen stuff. Sure. So this is kind of making sure that the guitars is heard on like more mono focused like speaker systems or whatever it might be.
Sure, so that's just the EQ just for the mid of that stereo image?
Yeah, I can play it here, just solo it up so you can hear it. I'm gonna turn it off here next round. So if you listen to this in a phone or a Bluetooth speaker or whatever, it's very apparent when this is not on. This is like a safety, just make sure that all the notes are coming through, even in the mono or in the mid stereo field, so it doesn't disappear. But this is like an obscene amount of EQ. I kind of feel ashamed showing this amount of EQ, but these are like different. I think this is the EQ I made manually, I suppose. And the rest is more like different tone matches. I have a bunch of like tones I'm super happy with that I tone match to and kind of use as a building block for the mix to come together. And these are probably two different ones I used in different amounts. So like if I do a tone match, I can do this, and then I can do this. So like different amounts of correction. So like this is like 2 dBs here and 1.5 dB here. So this, when I tone match this was probably more like that.
Yeah.
But it sounds a bit weird when you go 100%. So I just kind of dial it back probably. And same goes for this here. And also you can tone match in different stages. You can tone match on the actual guitar bus, but you can also tone match in the master to actually get the final sound and have that be your EQ.
Sure. And on the individual channels on the double-tracked rhythm guitars, what's going after the Gajera?
That's just the cab.
Just the
That's
cab.
it.
Okay.
So the next step is the bus and these EQ moves. Yeah.
And you got a little bit of multi-band compression
Yep,
there?
it's the same as the bass. I just really love what this does, especially to the high end. Of course, the low end, when you shug on the guitar, it's going to produce that bloom in the low end, so this takes care of that. But it also lets me have super bright guitar tones without them sounding brittle, which is, it can happen really easily. But this is kind of how it reacts here. There it kind of reacts on the shells.
And without that,
hard to hear now, but I can guarantee you, like, this is just another way to maintain the frequency signature that I gave this. So this just maintains it. So whatever's happening is not going to exceed any threshold here because I'm just keeping it in place.
Sure. And then the inserts after that?
Yeah. Then we go to the distortion. This is like. For when there's riffs that are more choppy, I call it, but it's like when it's quiet and it's loud, quiet, loud. This kind of adds a little bit of a transient. So like if I play da, 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 it's gonna have a little bit of that going, and without it. But I can see if I can maybe cut stuff up here, and I can show you if I do something like this to just see if you can hear. If I go extreme with it. Yeah, but it's like I'm not compressing that hard on this song because it's not kind of asking for that amount, because there's not a lot of that like choppy type riffs, but that usually the bands I mix kind of go for that sound a lot. So this kind of helps with having the guitars have some attack to it.
Because what I've seen before in some of your previous mix sessions is you've taken a bass amp signal and frequency bracketed it up to the high end, and then added that for kind of like added note definition. And that's kind of doing a similar thing. It's just adding that like transient.
For sure. Yeah, I used to do that for like adding like that stringy type sound, and that's cool. It's still a cool way to do it, but for some reason I haven't done it in a while. But you know, stuff falls in and out of like favor as far as what you want to go for. But this is also just thicken stuff up. I'm not sure this is like level matched. Let's see if we can. Yeah, but it's subtle, like anything. This is tape saturation. Adds like it kind of shaves off that super high end, and it has like a very significant bass boost in the lows. I might be like 50 or 60 hertz. I'm not sure if you can hear the difference exactly here, but yeah, it just sounds super thin. It adds mid-range, removes that super hissy high end, and adds weight, and yeah, it just sounds nice. And this is, yeah, that's that. After that, and it's the widening thing. Does a lot. It does a lot for the frequencies. But I mix with this on, so like that. This is like default. So like when I'm turning it off, it's like it sounds weird to me.
I've never used the stereo shuffler. I've got just the stereo widener, but
this is just I learned to mix a lot from this guy Brian Hood, who was like he was like my early mixing idol, and he had a course where he put this on guitars, so this kind of never left.
Right.
And I haven't really tinkered with it a lot. It's just like, yeah, it sounds good, and it's on. I'm not really, there's like a frequency. You can dial in the frequencies. I guess like below 650 is where the widening is occurring. I'm pretty sure, but maybe I'm wrong even. I don't know. But I hope that's what it is. But so there's like the shuffler is a bit different than the regular widening one. And then we have the kick ducker. This is one of those tricks I learned when I mixed the Ashen album by HLB, because all the instruments had a lot of low end, and I had to somehow make it work and make it impact together. And this was one of the ways to do that, because effectively it's only turning down the bass when the kick hits really fast, which means that all the sustaining notes is still going to have that low end that you want. So you're not losing low end by doing this because it's so fast, but the kick will still hit you, you know?
Absolutely, and you're not losing, you don't get that pumping effect because it's only in the low frequencies and quite solid. Where have you got the frequency there? Is it around?
It's 9, I think it's effectively like from here and down, which is like, what is that? It's like 90. I was in 90 and down, but as you say, there's a slope here.
Sure.
So this is like at 120.
Yeah.
And super fast release. The attack is more like to make sure that all of the kick is covered, so it's not too fast. It has to stay long enough for the kick to kick in, or like to come in and out, basically.
Sure. And the approach between your bass and guitars here, was there any sort of, you know, we were chatting earlier about getting that separation and the sense of clarity yet cohesion at the same time. When you listen to the guitars, we were chatting earlier about, you were saying that you go out and get every instrument as you want it in isolation, then you put it into the mix and see what needs to change to get that to work. Can you remember what you needed to do to solve any problems between the guitar and bass?
I feel like what I do usually is listen to the bass without the sub and the guitars, and that way I can hear the tone of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I do is basically turn the grid up till I hear it, and when I'm listening, it's like, what am I hearing from the grid? Am I hearing the mids? Am I hearing the lows? Am I hearing the high mids? Usually there's one sticking out, and I bring that down in level, and then I bring the entire level up again. So what am I hearing now? I'm hearing maybe too much low mids is taking over. So bring that down and bring the level up again till it's like even with the guitars. So that's how I do it with guitars. But like tinkering with the low end at the same time as the guitars doesn't make sense, because this is gonna affect the kick. So it's not relevant. So this is I only set the level of this with the kick.
Sure.
So I remove all of this stuff that's ducking the kick. I'm removing all of it, and then I filter my master. So this is my master at the end, so it sounds like this. So I filter that, and I listen to only the bass and the drums, and I bring this up till I feel like it's taking over the kick, and then I bring it a little bit back down, and then I turn on all of this ducking stuff. Then I make sure that I'm at the right level with the kick. So that's how I dial in the sub. Yeah.
Brilliant methodology for solving some of those challenges that we're talking about. Absolutely superb. From here, could we have a look at your vocal processing approach?
Of course. Let me just close these so we don't get any CPU errors. But these are all bounced down to stems because I have a plugin I apply to all of my stems called Pi. And Pi is a phase, what do they call it? Phase interactions mixer, I think they're calling it. But it's like there's so much happening between these instruments, and to make sure everything is in phase, regardless of what notes the guitar is playing or what rhythm the kick is playing with those notes, the phase relationship is going to be different for each part of each riff. So if I use this, I can make sure that the bass is aligned with the kick. That's basically what it is, but it's like I use it on guitar as well, and I also use it on effects tracks such as like sub drops or impact sounds. So it looks like this. I have the low frequency mode engaged. You can also do full frequency, but I don't really see the point. Yeah. So this is aligning the low end of all of these three. It's pretty subtle, but it just makes sure that the kick and the bass and the guitar, the low end of those are kind of not competing with each other, but adding to each other instead. Yeah. So if we listen, I don't know if you're going to hear the difference here, but let's try. So if you're listening to this in headphones, that might be the best way to listen and hear the actual difference. To me, it's just like, I know what this is doing, and I know it's always better when it's on. So I don't even question it. I don't even try it out. No. I just, this is going to be on now. Yeah. And here is some quick EQ moves I did, just controlling some of the high stringy noise on the bass, and just dropping some of the mids on the guitar. It was just like last minute changes. Just
dynamic EQ, is it?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm boosting the same amount as I'm cutting with the dynamic. Okay, I'm boosting 1 dB and cutting 2 dBs. So the dynamic EQ is doing 2 dBs, and I'm boosting the overall frequency 1 dB. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just making that high end of, or like high mid of the bass more consistent.
Can you just have a quick listen to that with it on and off? That'd be interesting to have.
Let's find that part where he's riffing a bit. Yeah. Also turn that filter. Is it focusing? Yeah, there we go. So let's. Very subtle, but it's like I probably heard this in the mix with everything going. It's like, whoa, the bass is really going crazy there. Yeah. So I just kind of tamed it a little bit to kind of have it on the same level. So it's not meant to be a huge difference, and it's not a huge difference.
No.
Okay, we have a bunch of stuff. This, oh, that's the gutturals. Okay, let's see. Okay, these are. Right, I got these already processed, I'm pretty sure. Already compressed.
Yeah.
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 So the only thing I did on the channel here is just Gullfoss.
From the solitude of Trojan's horse.
Got some saturation.
Race Sally goes falling.
Not that I can see. No saturation on this. Probably on the screams. Right. No, I mean, okay, let's just begin with this. So this is kind of acting like a de-esser, and also like some of the notes he's singing might resonate a lot in like the low mids, or like 200 to 500 hertz maybe. So this takes care of that, but not too much. We still want it.
From the solitude of Trojan's
mostly it's taking care of the S sounds.
Yeah.
Then it goes to my clean bus here. It's clean singing basically. Yeah. This is just a light compression to maintain the level between the amount of takes. Usually I get way more takes than this. So like I can get like 30 vocal takes in different amounts. So I need to control the level of everything. But this might not need it that much.
In solitude, I was saved.
I just want, like, when all of these takes are going, I want them to be the same level as when one take is going. Yeah. So I don't want it to jump out too much. Then we have just EQ, taming, some honky, like, stuff. Yeah, like E, that kind of stuff.
Angels.
Some soothe, like I showed you before.
Yeah.
In solitude, I was saved.
As you can see, I have a pretty like similar setup for this as like guitars and bass, as far as like the Pro MB stuff. Just kind of committing to a frequency signature and just making sure that I keep this, that it's not like departing too much from the EQ I made.
From the solitude of Trojan's horse, race Shelly goes far.
So yeah, just maintaining that frequency response. Then we have this. This is being sent to, from all of my stems here, I send a signal to this plugin, which makes the vocal be the same level compared to the music throughout. So it'll listen to the track.
From the solitude of Trojan's horse.
Do adjustments so the level is the same. Same, what's it called? Same relationship between the vocals and the rest of the track.
So bus 3 is your send from the whole mix pretty much to the vocal rider.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's it. Then we have some effects stuff and some more compression. This has a bit of compression here. Sub, not sure we need that, but it's on. So with and without this is probably gonna be a pretty big difference, at least level-wise. Let's see.
Praise the war played out within. Praise the war played out within.
There's like some stereo width and some tight, like shorter reverb, compression, some high-end boost and some low-end boosts. So it's just like more processing basically. And all of these sends here are sending to my my vocal effects, which are here. So I have a bunch of it, but I'm not sure how much I'm using for this. This is all from my template.
Yeah. The
so 3 different reverbs, 2 different delays that also are being sent to the reverb.
My victorious
wordless compared to the reverbs.
Yeah.
Directly or as a send?
Send.
As a send,
yeah.
Lovely.
Let's see if we can hear these. It's always tricky to get to isolate only the effects. So that's one reverb. This. Some EQ, a lot of EQ actually, and dynamic. I basically want my reverbs to be around like 500 hertz to 3K, around there. I don't want it over or under, especially not under, because it can be really weird. Yeah, muddy. Next reverb is the same processing afterwards, but it's this. It's just like, I can't decide what reverb I'm gonna use. Let's use all of them, basically, all of the ones I like, and then blend them in. If something sounds weird, fix it. But it usually doesn't sound very weird. It's just a nice reverb sound. And the last one is the shorter. It's probably just me seeing, like, getting sessions like, oh, they use this reverb, sounds great. This also sounds great. So it's like, let's use all of them, basically. So there's no really clear direction. Then we have regular reverb, right? Yeah, just regular reverb. Or delay, yeah. Super low. But then we have this filtered type. I got this from Dan, Dan Braunstein, who engineered the Silent Planet record I did.
Okay.
And he uses this a lot. This is like filtered stereo. It has the widening on it, a lot of widening, like chorusy delay that I really like the sound. It's not modern. So let's see. So all of them together with the vocal.
My solitude, I've Trojan's ours.
that
Raise
loud.
Jericho's
It's just a
falling.
nice depth to everything, and I'm sure it adds to the overall widening as well, like you talked about. I'm sure this adds to it as well, with all the widening going on.
Yeah, but no specific widening tools on the vocals then.
I usually go for this, the doubler, but I took it off because I thought it was too much in combination with this, because this is a lot of widening already. So this is kind of my main widening on these vocals at least. So that's what I'm using.
And just going back to the main EQ curves on your vocals, just what was your main?
Basically this.
Yeah.
Because these were already processed, so I didn't have to do that much. So I'm just making sure that they're maintained, basically.
Yeah.
So this is maintaining the frequency curve, and this is maintaining the frequency curve, and this is maintaining the frequency curve. So I'm not kind of changing the overall curve that much.
No. And then with the additional instruments, there were horns and...
Right, but we have this scream thing, I think. We'll see what this is.
That's
Break the wall, fade out,
That's Aaron from My Damn Bride.
Oh, cool. So yeah, same here, just maintaining, but this, I'm adding this compressor here, is super aggressive compressor, just to make it... This is like, if you compress a half dB with this, it sounds like 20. So I'm just doing nothing, basically, but it does a lot sound-wise.
What software is that?
That's Gain Reduction by Joey Sturgis.
Okay.
break the wall, fade out,
And then basically the same setup, a little more EQ, just taming some lows, but just the same as this and the Vocal Rider one. And here I'm using doubler. So I'm using the doubler here for widening, and I'm using the CLA vocals here. It kind of changes, whatever works.
Yeah.
Yeah, the synths, let's jump in. I'm just gonna mute the stem here so we can see what I actually did on the channels. Okay, probably didn't do a whole lot. Usually what I do with stems is two things. I'm filtering the low end away, but I do it with a slope that is super light. It's not that, but it's more like more gentle slope. But yeah, okay, so here I just cut a bunch of low end because what I want, all of this is going to be guitars and bass, so I don't want this to interfere too much. I want the synths usually to be around like this area here, to be there more than here, and like 99% of the time, all of the synths are like focused around this area for some reason. So I always have to tame it. But usually my move is like this, like a super long slope, just shaving off. That's usually my move, but I did this. And then I did the Gullfoss again. Gullfoss, like I said, is great for sustained sounds without like transients, just like... and depending on the notes, like you see here, it's pretty dynamic, this track, and that's kind of depending on what notes the strings here are plucking or playing. It's gonna resonate in different frequencies.
Got you.
So
you tend to use Gullfoss more on the sustained characteristics and soothe more on...
I use soothe as well, but like this didn't come across too harsh to my ears, so I didn't have to use it. But I use them both a lot, like with each other at the same time, because they do different things. Soothe is more like it finds the resonances really like detailed peaks it can take care of, but this is more like an overall EQ curve in another way. Because if you have soothe and you crank it and get rid of that those frequencies or the harshness, the frequency profile is still going to be the same. This changes the profile, so this is more like an overall EQ. And I found like 30% is like don't go over that 99% of the time. I don't use the recover thing here because it adds a lot of low end that I don't want. So I just found that 30% with this works for so many things. So yeah, let's see if we can listen without and with. More that type of frequency, but now it's more bright. The nice thing about having Gullfoss after a cut like this is going to bring up a lot of harshness because I'm removing all of the fundamental notes, which kind of focus stuff up here, which can get harsh. But then I add this after, which takes care of that, and then you just get a wonderful, nice sound. So best of all the worlds, I suppose. And I'm pretty sure this is the same move on the piano and brass here. And I left some low end in here probably because I always think like people who sit with and make these synths, they probably crank them 10 dB over the track, and it's like, wow, what a nice low end from my brass. And so I kind of feel bad shaving that all away. So I'm just keeping this for the producer's sake, for your sake.
So would I be right in saying that your synths there, you're not really processing them with any time delay processing, any effects?
I can do that sometimes for sure, but I listened to these and these sounded wet enough to me. Because sometimes I can get really dry synth stuff or like strings or whatever, that just sounds terrible. And like a way to make fake strings to sound real is adding reverb, but then I have to go through all of the like places where they might have automated stuff quietly, so it should go from 0 to nothing, and if it's gonna go quiet then I have to automate the reverb, then I have to go through maybe an entire album of automating reverb because I thought it sounded a bit dry. So you kind of have to weigh the options a bit, but this sounded fine to me as far as that went, because the song is fast and you have to fit it all in, and if it was a bit slower I could fit it in a bit more, but yeah.
I just exported it in the different libraries with reverb on it and of kind of like natural from the string libraries.
Yeah. Like you see here, this is supposed to be quiet. Like if I would put a reverb on this would ring until here, and maybe that would sound weird because this guitar here is supposed to be by itself. So it's always like you kind of have to think about more than like actually adding a reverb. Like what does that lead to? Yeah, you have to go through everything, and is it really worth it? But yeah, usually, I mean, I do it. I obviously, if I think it's too dry, I'll do it, of course, but this sounded fine to me.
Excellent. Moving on to your master bus signal chain, do you have a, as a fundamental question with your master bus, do you tend to go with either fast attack, fast release that brings up the sustain, particularly the snare and the kick, or do you go more like 10 or 30 milliseconds to emphasize the transient on the master bus?
I used to do that, emphasizing the transient, but I feel like the best sound to my ears is like having the drums be really attack heavy and transient heavy, and then having a compressor with fast release and fast attack that ducks the snare and the kick a little bit. So if you see here, taking care of the snare, but what that kind of means is I can have a louder snare than I would if I would do like a 30 millisecond, because that's just gonna make the snare louder. So, but this is kind of clamping down on that snare, but that also has an effect on the mix that kind of implies impact and gives you that. It kind of sucks the mix in really fast, and that sounds like impact to me. and it registers that way to me, to my ears, so it sounds better.
Do you ever have concerns about the way that the guitars are hitting the master bus compression and what they're doing to the guitars, like chewing them up slightly? Is that ever something you've encountered?
No, I think like it's only affecting the drums, and it's fast enough that you can't really detect what it's doing to the guitars, at least in my ears. But using a setting like this kind of requires you to have loud drums, like louder, a lot louder. So if I turn this off, let's see, is there going to be a level difference? Maybe we can do that.
Trojan's ours!
Let's see if we can do this. Hold on. Just gonna move this down, copy of it, and remove the boost here, so we can compare. Maybe we do. Yeah, the drums are so loud, way too loud. But now they're not. So like, if I would tailor the drum level without this, then the bus compressor might chew up the guitars, like you said.
Sure.
But since my drums are that loud, it's gonna only affect the drums.
Sure.
And it kind of lets me have super loud drums.
Got you. So on your master bus, you've got a mix rack.
A lot of
kicking off?
stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. There's so much. This is also like a thing that, like, I put stuff on. It's like, oh, it's made it sound better, and then I didn't take it off. And then I tried another thing. Oh, it sounds better, and then I kept it. So it's like it's so much stuff, and there's a lot of like volume discrepancy here. I'm not I can't say I'm not a fan, but I don't do proper gain staging most of the time because I don't see the usage of it more than kind of comparing back and forth.
Sure.
Which I do sometimes, and then if I do that, I have to do the gain structuring that way. But this is not for whatever reason. But
oh yeah,
so
the
let's
instrument
see.
bus. Yeah,
Yeah, this is
fascinating.
only affecting drum space guitars.
Yep.
So I muted the rest bus, which is synths and vocals. Here's just this is just adjusting the level going into my chain. That's why I brought the entire mix down, because it was too loud. So I'm boosting 100 hertz, 1 dB here. This is like no, I'm not. It's off. I see. I usually do that, but I probably this is a move that works better for down-tuned stuff, because the down-tuned stuff is going to be more around maybe 60 hertz or stuff. So it might be missing some of that 100 hertz.
Yeah.
So that's why I go for that. But this didn't need that because it's not that down-tuned.
But some console emulation there.
Yeah, console emulation. Actually, it could be more like this, to be honest.
Yeah.
So let's put it there. Let's put it there. Cool. Then we have just like EQing all the instruments together is not the same thing as EQing the separate ones, I feel like. So this is just like to tame 1 dB of harshness. That's it, and it's compensating for the volume loss. So it just has a nice effect when you do like super loud mixes. When you combine all of these instruments, the combination of the instruments can generate stuff that you don't want. In the low end as well. But yeah, this time I just did that. You can kind of see in the frequency curve where it's the loudest. Maybe we should actually do a little bit of that. But yeah. So that's that. Then we have this. I barely use this anymore, but I must have mixed this a while ago. So
Low-end trick.
And also boosting a lot of high end.
Okay.
So this is cutting and boosting at the same frequency, which in turn means that it's kind of bringing the subs up and the higher bass frequencies down. But it's doing barely anything. So, but it's doing a lot. I'm boosting 3 dBs of like 12K, so it's doing a lot to the high end.
Yeah.
Then we have this. Wow, I'm doing this. I don't do this anymore, but let's do it. I'm usually only doing these 2 bands instead of all of the bands,
Yeah.
but this worked for this. So it's just like a little bit of parallel or of multiband compression. Is really important to pay attention to, like the attack times, because the higher I go frequency-wise, the faster attack I want. So if I listen to the high end, I don't want to hear any like. I want to hear more like super tight. It kind of removes any like weird transients that might appear in these higher like.
Sure.
So the attack here is 10, which is really fast. Then the high mid band is also 10. Then when we come down here to the low mid band, it's 20. So it's like kind of clamping down a little bit on the transient, but not totally destroying it.
Yeah.
But and also kind of takes that snare and doesn't make sure that if the snare is like it's not kind of building up in the low mids as much as it would without this.
Yeah.
And then slower attack on the really low lows to get some get some attack on that super low stuff. It kind of just also glues the kick and the bass together a bit more, but it's not removing any attack. It's just kind of keeps it all in place, and the attack is letting any transient through, and any attack kind of gets like better or more attacky, I suppose.
Sure.
And then we have this that I demonstrated, the master bus compressor. So like fast release, then almost the fastest attack to cut that snare and the kick, like I showed, but it's boosting a lot of level. The reason for that is like this is what I use for my distortions, because I have 2 distortions after this, and this also goes out when I'm at home. This goes out to my outboard gear, so I'm kind of controlling the amount of distortion I want on the entire mix. So this is going to be a bit louder.
So the amount of distortion that then goes to an instrument spread.
Right. So this is only the level. I'm just controlling the level going to the distortions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird way of doing it. It's not really a good way of doing it, to be honest, but that's how I'm doing it. So there's 2 distortions. One is just tape distortion, regular tape distortion, I guess. And then this is like a preset in Saturn that I found that just made stuff sound better to my ears. It was like in, I don't know, they changed the presets since I installed this, because before there was like a mastering thing here, and then you can find it. It was called like magic mastering, but I saved it as a preset, and it's doing a bunch of weird stuff that I don't understand.
Right.
With these, the blue thing here, it just sounds better, so I used it basically.
Yeah.
But let's see what it sounds like with and without all of these. Adds low end, adds glue, adds sustain, removes some of the weird transients. This will do the kind of the same thing, but this also brightens stuff up. Also, it does a lot to the low end. If we listen to the low end here, if we crank a little bit here, you can really hear the difference.
Oh yeah.
The kick has like way more like authority.
Yeah.
It just kind of, and I'll mix with these on a lot, because they change the frequency response a lot. So I just make sure they're on from the beginning, so that I mix into them. And then we have the rest bus, which I said like it's the vocals and the synths, and that has nothing on it. So and I don't want all of this processing I just showed you. I don't want that going to the vocals and the synths going to that, because it's gonna just destroy it.
Yeah.
But I want to destroy the instruments that way.
Yeah.
Then we have on the master bus here, which everything goes to. This is just an EQ replicating my outboard gear that I talked about.
Yeah.
So this is kind of what it does as far as the frequencies go. It's some distortion and EQ basically, but it scoops it, like more high end, less mids.
Outboard distortion?
Yeah, outboard distortion. So there's like two of them. There's the SSL Fusion drive, and then there's the Neve MBP master bus processor. Has the silk mode and the red mode.
Okay.
There's like a high frequency boost, a high frequency saturation and low frequency saturation. And I just cranked the low frequency saturation.
Sure.
Yeah. Then we had that what you talked about, using the Gullfoss on the master. I thought it removed too much of the kick and the snare impact. So I started just kind of moving it so it doesn't affect those.
Yep.
Still like the vocals and some of the cymbals and stuff like that, but it's not doing that much because I already have Gullfoss all over the place. So it's like this is just a final.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really need it. This is huge. Like I said, I always use this on the separate stuff as well, but this setting on the entire mix does a lot for me. Let's see. Usually this bass boost will be higher, but I brought it down. I thought it was too much, but yeah, it's just glue and mids and just let's see what you hear the difference here. It's not huge.
No.
But if this would be louder, it would be like huge. But I brought it down, so it effectively kind of makes it not do that much. But I've tried making mixes without this, and I just don't like it. I just like it with it on. So why not? And then we have two limiters. This is going to take a little time to load because I don't know why I'm doing this even. I'm using an old version of Isotope 4 for the limiting. That's also kind of a relic from that Brian Hood guy I was talking about. That was like my mixing idol. He used this, so I've been using it for years till FabFilter came out with the Pro L, and then I used them in tandem. But I kind of realized that there's only one of them actually doing gain reduction most of the time. Let's see if both of them are actually doing gain reduction. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see, this is not doing any gain reduction.
Yeah.
This is just level into this. So it's kind of stupid, but it is what it is. So this is basically not necessary. It's just boosting level into this.
Yeah.
And this is on transparent mode. And these settings, I don't think I've touched these settings at all.
Okay. But you're hitting lots, sort of like 6-8 dB of gain reduction there, is it?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah. Let's see how loud we are. I usually go for this, but that's also a Brian Hood relic. Using this to measure, I don't know. Maybe I should do like a proper LUFS measurement. This also has that. Let's see where we're at. 8.6, 8.4. It's loud.
Yeah.
I could probably go louder, but yeah. So this is the last step in the mix, and after this, it's done.
Amazing. Buster Odeholm, thank you so much indeed. That was absolutely fascinating. What a journey. Loved it.
Thanks for having me.